Journalism is dead. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed." What is the role of journalism? Today, are they chronicles of history or manipulators of narratives? 66% of the public don't see them as chronicles. They see manipulation through bias, hypocrisy, and omission. Let's take a look at some of the examples. The media decided a worldwide pandemic would be politicized, and the evidence was clear. Conservative governors are bad managers, while liberal governors are good managers. Governor Cuomo was hailed as a leader in COVID handling, while Governor DeSantis was vilified. Let's fact check that. At 21% of their population, Florida ranks number 1 in the United States with the highest percentage of adults over 65 years old, the population most vulnerable to COVID. Florida's population density is comparable to New York's, and their deaths are second in the nation, whereas Florida's ranks 27th. The facts were in opposition to the headlines. What happened to adhering to the principles of reporting? From the book, The Element of Journalism, authors Kovac and Rosenstiel remind us of the intellectual principles of a science of reporting, and those would be: never add anything that was not there originally, never deceive the audience, be as transparent as possible about your methods and motives, rely on your own original reporting, and exercise humility. Jonathan Turley says, "We have now lost any semblance of objectivity and neutrality that is consistent with the trend of journalism at large, where there are growing calls of advocacy in journalism." Where was advocacy in that list of journalistic principles? Turley, a preeminent constitutional expert, criminal defense professor at George Washington University, and lifelong Democrat, has been writing a great deal on the bias in the media lately. On the trial of Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd, Turley found it astonishing that the media perceived their role as advocate, not informer. He noted Alison Dorr of PBS and Coates of CNN were dangerous with their bias and manipulation by omitting the factual counter-arguments in the Chauvin murder trial, as well as adding their personal opinions. Turley said, "The failure to inform the public of the countervailing arguments in the trials, like the trial of Eric Chauvin, fuels our social divisions and the ongoing violence in our cities." Is the media stoking the ongoing racial violence? Is the media fueling anti-police sentiments? How can one explain the media's chronic omission of facts? The same week the Chauvin-Floyd murder verdict was reached, there were 2 teenage girls killed in Ohio. One was in Cincinnati and the other was in Columbus. In Cincinnati, a 13-year-old stabbed another 13-year-old to death. That story didn't make it to the national corporate media desks, or even in the first page of Google results, as you can see. As a result, it didn't make it to your television screen or inbox unless you lived locally. Could it be because one teen was black and the alleged teen killer was also black? The second teenager that was in Columbus was black, but her killer was white and a cop. This round of white cop kills unarmed black made the headlines. The reporting brought such outrage that NBA superstar and activist LeBron James tweeted a perceived threat with a photo of the cop and the warning, "You're next." The outrage was worldwide, as evidenced in this Australian news headline. CNN even reported that President Biden had been briefed on yet another white cop killing a black. There have been no reports of a presidential briefing on the stabbing death of 13-year-old Neera Givens of Cincinnati. What makes this reporting even more outrageous is the facts do not support the media attention. One relative newcomer to the principled media arena is Kyle Becker of Becker News. While Becker is right of center, he uses statistics to back up his articles. He cites Statista, and these stats pulled from the FBI's database on officer-involved killings. The Washington Post police shooting database further underscores how rare it is that unarmed black males are shot by police officers, claims Becker. When all the evidence from the past 6 years is evaluated, the odds for an unarmed black male being killed by police are 1 in a million. You wouldn't know it from the headlines and the media spin. How can the media defend spinning a destructive and divisive narrative? The coverage of the January 6th, 2021 Capitol riot was over the top, and the cause of death of Officer Sicknick was all lies for 4 months. and was even used as justification in the second impeachment trial of President Trump. This time, left-of-center journalist Glenn Greenwald systematically destroyed legacy media's narratives, writing in part, so, the New York Times on January 8th published an emotionally gut-wrenching but completely fictional article that never had any evidence that Officer Sicknick's skull was savagely bashed in with a fire extinguisher by a pro-Trump mob until he died. Then the story morphed into an allergic reaction to pepper spray, then bear spray, despite Sicknick's own family pleading with the press to stop with the lies. Finally, the autopsy revealed Brian Sicknick died of natural causes the day after the riots. Greenwald further added, just as with the Russia bounty debacle, they will never acknowledge what they did. Their audience wants to be lied to for partisan gain and emotional pleasure. Their audience wants to be lied to? Well, yeah. And that's according to Washington Post's own Margaret Sullivan, citing a study by the Media Insight Project. Only about 10% of Americans fully support the 5 pillars of journalism. The report broke along perceived moral lines rather than political ideological lines, but the findings show why misleading headlines and stories get the clicks, whereas straight facts do not. The funniest part about her title, Bad News for Journalists, the public doesn't share our values, but there's hope, is that the Washington Post's values, for decades, has been suspect, and not necessarily fact-based. The Washington Post's David Ignatius didn't even care if his reporting on Iraq weapons of mass destruction were false. It was a moral call for him, calling it a good deed, saying, "Personally, I don't much care if the U.S. reports about weapons of mass destruction prove to be imaginary." Ignatius didn't care about the truth. He is a mouthpiece for the military state where fairness doesn't matter. He's also tied to many circular reporting examples. Circular reporting is where an unverified source is used for a story. The government agency cites the story as a means to begin an investigation or confirm a narrative. The story is shared, and then the agency anonymously confirms. Glenn Greenwald tells us exactly how it's done. It's anything but honest and anything but fair. Fairness is overrated, said Lester Holt in his acceptance speech for the Edward R. Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award. Holt said it is not the responsibility of journalists today to offer both sides of any particular story if the journalist believes the other side's version is demonstrably false. That stance violates point 5 of reporting principles, the exercise of humility, and where the journalist believes their truth is superior to the truth. So the other side doesn't deserve your time, and they will present what they want you to know, what they want you to feel. Is that the truth? Is there any way to present both sides of the truth? Patrice Onwuka, director of economic opportunity at the Independent Women's Forum, in the Washington Examiner panel discussion on media bias, lamented,
"It feels like we're spiraling down a hole where there are never going to be two sets of the same facts or the same information. And I don't know how we come back from that. I know there's a way, but I'm not sure how that is."
Will history show that we did? If W. Joseph Campbell, a journalism historian and professor at American University, has his say, yes, history will ultimately show that we got it right. But in the interim, myths in the media will continue through sloppy journalism. He penned Getting It Wrong, Debunking the Great Myths in American Journalism. In a 2017 interview with Pointer's Ben Mullen, Campbell says that critical distance is often needed to debunk the myths and likens it to opening a refrigerator door, smelling that something isn't quite right, and investigating what that is. While Campbell says an incurious media is to blame for many errors in reporting, he also reports to the Russia conclusion story with the Trump campaign as an example of aggressive investigations, albeit, as Campbell says, one without merit. The penalty for the Washington Post and New York Times collaboration on now-known circular reporting was a Pulitzer Prize in 2018. The cost, though, for the media, is an all-time low trust rating of 33% in the most recent Gallup polling. That's an industry on fire. The best way for journalism to rise from the ashes would be to return to their principles of reporting. Report both sides of a story. Never deceive their audience. Exercise humility. Verify sources. Don't join the circular reporting tribe. and let the reader or viewer come to their own conclusions.